Williams, appreciate it. I'm joined now by NBC national security analyst Jeremy Bash, who is chief of staff at the CIA and at the Pentagon. Jeremy, just a warning, we're waiting for the president to come out to the Rose Garden with Prime Minister Modi, so we might have to cut you off mid-thought. But to get started, the rationale for the ban was that they needed to do this for national security immediately, but it was only supposed to, at least in the beginnings, happen for 90 days. It's been 150 days. The rationale, does it still make any sense?
It does not, and that's exactly right. The president's prediction was that unless we banned all Muslims coming from these 6 countries, the terrorists would be streaming over our borders over the next 90 days. As you noted, that was 150 days ago. So the original rationale for the ban has gone out the window. That's why I think this was a narrow victory for the president today, but it was ultimately a hollow victory, because this, as a counterterrorism measure, was never put in place. It never, quote-unquote, protected the country. And now what the Supreme Court has done is they've lifted the lower court injunction, meaning not only can the ban go into place to some extent, but also, and I'm just watching the screen here to see if the president comes out, Katie, not only will the ban go into place, but also the vetting can go forward. And the vetting will happen over the course of several weeks. And as you said with Pete, you know, by the time the Supreme Court touches this again in October, this whole issue may be over, and the president will not have gotten any safety or security for the American people.
And we can see the president's wife, Melania, a number of his top cabinet officials are taking to their seats. They're standing at the moment. We are still waiting the president and Prime Minister Modi. Jeremy, what's the hard evidence that foreigners or refugees who have a connection to the U.S. are less of a terror risk than those who do not have a connection?
There's no evidence at all. In fact, all somebody needs to do in order to get into the country under this paradigm as set forth by the Supreme Court is go up to the visa office at the embassy and say, I've got a familial tie, and they just have to provide some basic evidence. I think it's going to be very easy for anybody who wants to get into the country to get into the country under this program, and I think it's going to be hard to keep people out.
Well, they have to provide documentation. Are you saying that the vetting process for these visas is not strong as it is?
Well, there is a strong vetting program already, but what the Supreme Court has said is all you have to do in addition is provide some credible claim that you've got a familial tie. And I think that's going to be fairly easy for most people to show who are determined to get into the country. And, of course, if someone is truly a terrorist, do we think that they are somehow above lying to the visa officer? That kind of makes no sense.
And we see the president's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, also his daughter Ivanka, and Gary Cohn as well in that frame right now. Jared Kushner right there. Jeremy, I was under the impression that it was actually the second-generation immigrants that end up posing more of a risk. The attackers in Orlando, San Bernardino, Garland, Fort Hood, and the Boston Marathon were all children of immigrants, those who did have a connection to family members, obviously, in the U.S.
It's a fair point. Many of those domestic attackers have been born inside the United States. In the UK, they have faced some of the same challenges where a lot of those terrorists there have been UK-born. It's the domestic radicalization issue that I think confronts our societies most acutely. But again, back to the overall structure of counterterrorism policy. Counterterrorism requires focus, Katie. You need to actually have specific information that leads you specific plots that can be disrupted. If you put entire populations of individuals, because of their nationality, because of their national origin, because of their religion, because of the way they look or they operate, if it's a broad suspicion, that is going to take away resources, it's going to take away focus from those individuals who need to be focusing on specific plots. Every counterterrorism official I've ever spoken to believes that focus is the #1 key to counterterrorism.
And we're seeing members of the Indian delegation go to their seats as well. Again, we are awaiting President Trump and Prime Minister Modi to come out, take the podiums. No doubt we're going to get Donald Trump, his reaction on camera to the travel ban. We're going to see if they do take any questions as well. Jeremy, does lifting part of this injunction, maybe this is a little bit too early to ask this, but does lifting part of this injunction set a precedent that the president's decisions when it comes to national security will it set a precedent, cannot be impeded, that they can go through no matter what?
Well, I thought it was interesting the way the court wrote this in this interesting opinion, and it was an unsigned opinion, a so-called per curiam opinion. Presidents that win per curiam opinions like to call them 9-0 unanimous decisions, but they are sort of a little bit different. They are an unsigned opinion from the court. And what they said was, in balancing the president's national security powers versus other equities here, we have to defer to the president in his national security powers. But this was not a constitutional claim. Well, let's see the president and the Indian leader come to the podium now.
President Trump and Prime Minister Modi